My name is Heather Helinsky. I am a production dramaturg. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm here with Stefani, who is the playwright of Final Boarding Call. Hi, Stefani.
Hi, I'm Stefani, pronouns also she, her, hers, and excited to be here.
So could you first tell us how long you've been working on this play? Since it's about such a timely conversation, could you tell me when did you start to work on this piece?
Yeah, well, the protest in Hong Kong began in June of 2019, so about a year ago. And I started working on this probably around September of that year. So it's been 9 months as of now, more or less. But of course, it changes depending on what's happening in the city and also in the world. It moved really quickly for me in terms of the process of creating and changing it, because so much was going on that related to the play.
Right now you're in Hong Kong with family, but prior to that, you have been working in the US. Can you tell me just a little bit about yourself and where you've been working lately?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Hong Kong. My mom is Taiwanese, so I'm half Taiwanese, half Hong Kongese. And I grew up here and then went to the US for school when I was 14 to go to boarding school. And so I ended up staying for college and then moved to New York after, but also like before that worked in Berlin and some other places. And yeah, I spent most of my time in New York, but I'm also an actor on top of being a writer, which inevitably means working out of town every once in a while. And just sort of tried to navigate how to work as a freelance artist in New York for that period of time. And since then, I've also worked in Taiwan and Hong Kong and other places in Asia, but have mostly focused on New York and trying to figure out the interesting dilemma of like how to work in New York so that you can later leave New York and return to it as a home base, but not have to live there. Yeah.
That makes me think of a line in your script that talks about where home is. One of your characters talks about having a job is your home, and that's something that gets us into the world of the play. In this piece that talks about what's going on in Hong Kong, can you talk just a little bit more about, for both this play and these characters, what home does mean to someone from Hong Kong?
I think it's a really interesting and important conversation in Hong Kong and also just in general right now, because I think like the fact that I can even have the conversation of like where is my home is a huge privilege that a lot of people don't have. So like I think, you know, the ability to leave the US and return is something that mostly only citizens of the US have, which also goes for Hong Kong. Like the ability to leave Hong Kong is something that most people here don't have. And I think for me, like I've always considered Hong Kong home, which has always felt really tricky in terms of writing in the US, because I think for a long time, so much of what I was told would be appropriate for me to write is immigrant narratives, which I understood, but have only like in recent years kind of realized like I'm not an immigrant. My family never immigrated. And so like, I don't think that's what I am. I don't feel that's what I am because I've never decidedly picked up and left. I've sort of just like picked up and then stayed in between, which I think is a much more new thing in terms of globalization, and not having to pick where, you know, your identity or culture is influenced by. And I think like talking about like who has the resources to leave and who doesn't, and you know, what does the ability to leave do to your contribution to the place you call home when you can leave it, which I think is something that I question a lot in terms of myself and my work, is like, what do I write? What would I write differently if I couldn't leave this place? Which I think is really important given the political nature of a lot of it.
And the play also begins and ends with airports. Why are airports or those spaces so important, or like became an important opening image for you as you were writing this piece?
I think airports are important because Hong Kong is such a travel hub. I mean, it's a travel hub for tourists, but it's also like it's always been a port. Travel is so key to the kinds of people who come in and out of Hong Kong, and also it's such a transitive place. You don't necessarily move to Hong Kong thinking you're going to live here for 50 years. in the same way that you would moving to parts of the US. It's sort of how I felt growing up, going to school in the US, like that I spend so much time on airplanes and like that itself is a space also that isn't just traveling. It's you kind of exist in that space, and that even that space, which I feel like is so quote unquote metaphorical, like the space of travel, is also rooted in capitalism and the relationships between these countries. And like, you know, like I think a lot about like when you're on a flight that's a German airline, that's German airspace, or like, you know, like who defines what space belongs to whom, and like when and how, and what are borders if you're in a border while you're moving across borders, you know. Just like, yeah, I just have lots of thoughts about where what is.
It's great. And, you know, one of the things that we really liked from the start about this place is that you did bring a lot of different characters into the world. And I know some writers will say that like characters just appeared in my head. How did you make decisions about what characters sort of best represent the moment Hong Kong is in right now? And also we've talked about in the past of like this play's ability to explain the situation for American audiences through this play.
At the heart of it, which I think is what maybe we miss in so much of like the more graphic and like more sensationalized media, is that like at the root of it, these are people who, like everyone around the world, wants a home, has people they love, like has a place that they maybe love or don't know how they feel about, and like is fighting for something, whether that's small or big, personal, impersonal. I'm mostly interested in like telling the story of a bunch of people who all love one place and like do it in different ways and understand it in different ways, and how do they go about it, and how does it conflict when they butt heads.
And I think that's a story that we can all relate to. But at the same time, I feel it's so important that we tell this story right now of what's going on in Hong Kong, since so much of our attention is not on that right now. Well, I just want to say thank you so very much for your time tonight. I know I'm excited to work further with you on this and get into more conversations like this. So take care.
Yeah, you too.